All my shit should be in order. I think we're good. Sound should be good. It says it's working, so we'll just go with that. So we're going into actual part 2 of the book. Let's see, how do they have this split? Oh boy. 72. Oh boy, that's going to be interesting split. Well, let's try for it. Get a little sip before we go into this. This working? Should be okay. Hopefully no echo. And we'll get started. Part 2, Question 1. Of those against whom the power of witches availeth not at all. The second main part of this work deals with the method of procedure adopted by witches for the performance of their witchcraft, and these are distinguished under 18 heads, proceeding from 2 chief difficulties. The first of these 2, dealt with in the beginning, concerns protective remedies, by which a man is rendered immune from witchcraft. The second, dealt with at the end, concerns curative remedies, by which those who are bewitched can be cured. For, as Aristotle says, Physics 4, prevention and cure are related to one another, and are, accidentally, matters of causation. In this way, the whole foundation of this horrible heresy may be made clear. If in the above 2 divisions, the following points will be principally emphasized. First, the initiation of witches and their profession of sacrilege. Second, the progress of their method of working and of their horrible observances. Third, the preventative protections against their witchcrafts. And because we are now dealing with matters relating to morals and behavior, and there is no need for a variety of arguments and disquisitions, since those matters which now follow under their headings are sufficiently discussed in the foregoing questions, therefore we pray God that the reader will not look for proofs in every case, since it is enough to adduce examples that have been personally seen or heard, or are accepted at the word of credible witnesses. In the first of the points mentioned, 2 matters will be chiefly examined. First, the various methods of enticement adopted by the devil himself. Second, the various ways in which witches profess their heresy. And in the second of the main points, 6 matters will be examined in order, relating to the procedure of witchcraft and its cure. First, the practices of witches with regard to themselves and their own bodies. Second, their practices with regard to other men. Third, those relating to beasts. Fourth, the mischief they do to the fruits of the earth. Fifth, those kinds of witchcraft which are practiced by men only and not by women. Sixth, the question of removing witchcraft and how those who are bewitched may be cured. The first question, therefore, is divided into 18 heads, since in so many ways are their observances varied and multiplied. It is asked whether a man can be so blessed by the good angels that he cannot be bewitched by witches in any of the ways that follow. And it seems that he cannot, for it has already been proved that even the blameless and innocent and the just are often afflicted by devils, as was Job. And many innocent children, as well as countless other just men, are seen to be bewitched, although not to the same extent as sinners, for they are not afflicted in the perdition of their souls, but only in their worldly goods and their bodies. But the contrary is indicated by the confessions of witches, namely, that they cannot injure everybody, but only those whom they learn through the information of devils to be destitute of divine help. Answer. There are 3 classes of men blessed by God, whom that detestable race cannot injure with their witchcraft. And the first are those who administer public justice against them, or prosecute them in any public official capacity. The second are those who, according to the traditional and holy rites of the Church, make lawful use of the power and virtue which the Church by her exorcisms furnishes in the aspersion of holy water, the taking of consecrated salt, the carrying of blessed candles on the day of the purification of Our Lady, of palm leaves upon Palm Sunday, and men who thus fortify themselves are acting so that the powers of devils are diminished. And of these we shall speak later. The third class are those who, in various and infinite ways, are blessed by the holy angels. The reason for this in the first class will be given and proved by various examples. For since, as St. Paul says, all power if from God, and a sword for the avenging of the wicked and the retribution of the good, it is no wonder that devils are kept at bay when justice is being done to avenge that horrible crime. To the same effect, the doctors note that there are 5 ways in which the devil's power is hindered, either wholly or in part. First, by a limit fixed by God to his power, as is seen in Job 1 and 2. Another example is the case of the man we read of in Formicarius of Nider, who had confessed to a judge that he had invoked the devil in order that he might kill an enemy of his, or do him bodily harm, or strike him dead with lightning. And he said, "When I had invoked the devil that I might commit such a deed with his help, he answered me that he was unable to do any of those things, because the man had good faith and diligently defended himself with the sign of the cross, and that therefore he could not harm him in his body, but the most he could do was to destroy an 11th part of the fruit of his lands." Secondly, it is hindered by the application of some exterior force, as in the case of Balaam's ass, Numbers 22. Thirdly, by some externally performed miracle of power, and there are some who are blessed with an unique privilege, as will be shown later in the case of the third class of men who cannot be bewitched. Fourthly, by the good providence of God, who disposes each thing severally, and causes a good angel to stand in the devil's way, as when Asmodeus killed the 7 husbands of the Virgin Sarah, but did not kill Tobias. Fifthly, it is sometimes due to the caution of the devil himself, for at times he does not wish to do hurt in order that worse may follow from it, as, for example, when he could molest the excommunicated but does not do so, as in the case of the excommunicated Corinthian, Corinthians 5, in order that he may weaken the faith of the church in the power of such banishment. Therefore, we may similarly say that even if the administrators of public justice were not protected by divine power, yet the devils often of their own accord withdraw their support and guardianship from witches, either because they fear their conversion or because they desire and hasten their damnation. This fact is proved also by actual experience, for the aforesaid doctor affirms that witches have borne witness that it is a fact of their own experience that, merely because they have been taken by officials of public justice, they have immediately lost all their power of witchcraft. For example, a judge named Peter, whom we have mentioned before, wished his officials to arrest a certain witch called Stadlin. But their hands were seized with so great a trembling, and such a nauseous stench came into their nostrils, that they gave up hope of daring to touch the witch. And the judge commanded them, saying, "You may safely arrest the wretch, for when he is touched by the hand of public justice, he will lose all the power of his iniquity." And so the event proved, for he was taken and burned for many witchcrafts perpetrated by him, which are mentioned here and there in this work in their appropriate places. And many more such experiences have happened to us inquisitors in the exercise of our inquisitorial office, which would turn the mind of the reader to wonder if it were expedient to relate them. But since self-praise is sordid and mean, it is better to pass them over in silence than to incur the stigma of boastfulness and conceit. But we must accept those which have become so well known that they cannot be concealed. Not long ago in the town of Ratisbon, the magistrates had condemned a witch to be burned, and were asked why it was that we inquisitors were not afflicted like other men but with witchcraft. They answered that witches had often tried to injure them, but could not, And being asked the reason for this, they answered that they did not know, unless it was because the devils had warned them against doing so. For, they said, it would be impossible to tell how many times they have pestered us by day and by night, now in the form of apes, not of dogs or goats, disturbing us with their cries and insults, fetching us from our beds as their blasphemous prayers, so that we have stood outside the window of their prison, which was so high that no one could reach it without the longest of ladders. And then they have seemed to stick the pins with which their headcloth was fastened violently into their heads. But praise be to Almighty God, who in his pity, and for no merit of our own, has preserved us as unworthy public servants of the justice of the faith. The reason in the case of the second class of men is self-evident, for the exorcisms of the Church are for this very purpose, and are entirely efficacious remedies for preserving oneself from the injuries of witches. But if it is asked in what manner a man ought to use such protections, we must speak first of those that are used without the uttering of sacred words, and then of the actual sacred invocations. For in the first place, it is lawful in any decent habitation of men or beasts to sprinkle holy water for the safety and securing of men and beasts, with the invocation of the most holy Trinity and a paternoster. For it is said in the office of exorcism that wherever it is sprinkled, all uncleanliness is purified, all harm is repelled, and no pestilent spirit can abide there, etc. For the Lord saves both man and beast, according to the prophet, each in his degree. Secondly, just as the first must necessarily be sprinkled, so in the case of a blessed candle, although it is more appropriate to light it, the wax of it may be with advantage be sprinkled about dwelling houses. And thirdly, it is expedient to place or to burn consecrated herbs in those rooms where they can best be consumed in some convenient place. Now it happened in the city of Spires, in the same year that this book was begun, that a certain devout woman held conversation with a suspected witch, and after the manner of women, they used abusive words to each other. But in the night she wished to put her little suckling child in its cradle, and remembered her encounter that day with the suspected witch. So, fearing some danger to the child, she placed consecrated herbs under it, sprinkled it with holy water, put a little blessed salt to its lips, signed it with the sign of the cross, and diligently secured the cradle. About the middle of the night she heard the child crying, and as women do, wished to embrace the child, and light the cradle on her bed. She lifted the candle, indeed, but could not embrace the child, because he was not there. The poor woman, in terror, and bitterly weeping for the loss of her child, lit a light and found the child in a corner under a chair, crying but unhurt. In this it may be seen what virtue there is in the exorcisms of the Church against the snares of the devil. It is manifest that Almighty God, in his mercy and wisdom, which extend from end to end, watches over the deeds of those wicked men, and that he gently directs the witchcraft of devils, so that when they try to diminish and weaken the faith, they, on the contrary, strengthen it, and make it more firmly rooted in the hearts of many. For the faithful may derive much profit from these evils. When by reason of devils' works, the faith is made strong, God's mercy is seen, and his power manifested, and men are led into his keeping into the reverence of Christ's passion, and are enlightened by the ceremonies of the Church. There lived in a town of Wiesenthal a certain mayor who was bewitched with the most terrible pains and bodily contortions, and he discovered, not by means of other witches, but from his own experience, how that witchcraft had been practiced on him. For he said he was in the habit of fortifying himself every Sunday with blessed salt and holy water, but that he had neglected to do so on one occasion, owing to the celebration of somebody's marriage, and on that same day he was bewitched. In Ratisbon, a man was being tempted by the devil in the form of a woman to copulate, and became greatly disturbed when the devil would not desist. But it came into the poor man's mind that he ought to defend himself by taking blessed salt, as he had heard in a sermon. So he took some blessed salt on entering the bathroom, and the woman looked fiercely at him, and, cursing whatever devil had taught him to do this, suddenly disappeared. For the devil can, with God's permission, present himself either in the form of a witch or by possessing the body of an actual witch. There were also 3 companions walking along a road, and 2 of them were struck by lightning. The third was terrified when he heard voices speaking in the air. "Let us strike him too." But another voice answered, "We cannot, for today he has heard the words. The word was made flesh, and he understood that he had been saved because he had that day heard Mass, and at the end of Mass, the Gospel of St. John. In the beginning was the Word," etc. Also, sacred words bound to the body are marvelously protective, if 7 conditions for their use are observed. But these will be mentioned in the last question of this second part. Where we speak of curative, as here we speak of preventative measures, and those sacred words help not only to protect, but also to cure those who are bewitched. But the surest protection for places, men, or animals are the words of the triumphal title of our Savior, if they be written in 4 places in the form of a cross: Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judaeorum. There may be added the name of Mary and of the evangelists, or the words of St. John, "The Word was made flesh." But the third class of men, which cannot be hurt by witches, is the most remarkable, for they are protected by a special angelic guardianship, both within and without, within by the inpouring of grace, without by the virtue of the stars, that is, by the protection of the powers which move the stars. And this class is divided into 2 sections of the elect. For some are protected against all sorts of witchcrafts, so that they can be hurt in no way, and others are particularly rendered chaste by the good angels with regard to the generative functions, just as evil spirits by their witchcrafts inflame the lusts of certain wicked men towards one woman, while they make them cold towards another. And their interior and exterior protection, by grace and by the influence of the stars, is explained as follows. For though it is God himself who pours grace into our souls, and no other creature has so great power as to do this, as it is said, "The Lord will give grace and glory," yet when God wished to bestow some especial grace, he does so in a positive way through the agency of a good angel, as St. Thomas teaches us in a certain place in the 3rd book of Sentences. Hey Liz. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Put that up. Chapter 1 of the several methods by which devils through witches entice and allure the innocent to the increase of that horrid craft and company. I'm doing well. Did I see how you're doing? How are you doing? It's a wonderful Monday, isn't it? All right. There are 3 methods above all by which devils, through the agency of witches, subvert the innocent, and by which that perfidy is continually being increased. And the first is through wariness, through inflicting grievous losses in their temporal possessions. For as St. Gregory says, the devil often tempts us to give way from very wariness. And it is to be understood that it is within the power of a man to resist such temptation, but that God permits it as a warning to us not to give way to sloth. And in this sense is Judges 2 to be understood, where it says that God did not destroy those nations, that through them he might prove the people of Israel, and it speaks of the neighboring nation of the Canaanites, Jebusites, and others. And in our time the Hussites and other heretics are permitted, so that they cannot be destroyed. Devils, therefore, by means of witches, so afflict their innocent neighbors with temporal losses, that they are to beg the suffrages of witches, and at length to submit themselves to their counsels, as many experiences have taught us. We know a stranger in the diocese of Augsburg, who before he was 44 years old, lost all his horses in succession through witchcraft. His wife, being afflicted with weariness by reason of this, consulted with witches, And after following their counsels, unwholesome as they were, all the horses which he bought after that, for he was a carrier, were preserved from witchcraft. And how many women have complained to us in our capacity of inquisitors, that when their cows have been injured by their being deprived of their milk, or any other way, they have consulted with suspected witches, and even been given remedies by them, on condition that they would promise something to some spirits, and when they asked what they would have to promise, the witches answered that it was only a small thing, that they should agree to execute the instructions of that master with regard to certain observances during the holy offices of the church, or to observe some silent reservations in their confessions to priests. Here it is to be noted that, as has already been hinted, this iniquity has small and scant beginnings, as that of the time of the elevation of the body of Christ they spit on the ground, or shut their eyes, or mutter some vain words. We know a woman who yet lives, protected by the secular law, who, when the priest at the celebration of the Mass blesses the people, saying Dominus Iubiscum, always adds to herself these words in the vulgar tongue, Cer mir die Zung im Ars Or they even say some such thing at confession after they have received absolution, or do not confess everything, especially mortal sins, and so by slow degrees are led to a local abnegation of the faith, and to the abominable profession of sacrilege. This, or something like it, is the method which is used towards honest matrons who are little given to carnal vices, but concerned for worldly profit. But towards young girls, more given to bodily lusts and pleasures, they observe a different method, working through their carnal desires and the pleasures of the flesh. Here it is to be noted that the devil is more eager and keen to tempt the good than the wicked, although in actual practice he tempts the wicked more than the good, because more aptitude for being tempted is found in the wicked than in the good. Therefore the devil tries all the harder to seduce all the more saintly virgins and girls, and there is reason in this besides many examples of it. For since he already possesses the wicked but not the good, he tries the harder to seduce into his power the good, whom he does not, than the wicked whom he does possess. Similarly, any earthly prince takes up arms against those who do not acknowledge his rule, rather than those who do not oppose him. And here is an example. 2 witches were burned at Ratisbon, as we shall tell later where we treat of their methods of raising tempests, and one of them, who was a Bath woman, had confessed among other things the following, that she had suffered much injury from the devil for this reason. There was a certain devout virgin, the daughter of a very rich man, whom there is no need to name, since the girl is now dead in the disposition of divine mercy, and we would not that his thought should be perverted by evil, and the witch was ordered to seduce her, by inviting her to her house on some feast day, in order that the devil himself, in the form of a young man, might speak with her. And although she had tried very often to accomplish this, yet whenever she had spoken to the young girl, she had protected herself with the sign of the Holy Cross, and no one can doubt that she did this at the instigation of a holy angel to repel the works of the devil. Another virgin living in the diocese of Strasbourg confessed to one of us that she was alone on a certain Sunday in her father's house, when an old woman of that town came to visit here, and, among other scurrilous words, made the following proposition, that if she liked, she would take her to a place where there were some young men unknown to all the townsmen. And when, said the virgin, I consented, and followed her to her house, the old woman said, See, we go upstairs to an upper room where the young men are, but take care not to make the sign of the cross. I gave her my promise not to do so, and as she was going up before me, and I was going up the stairs, I secretly crossed myself. At the top of the stairs, when we were both standing outside the room, the hag turned angrily upon me with a horrible countenance, and looking at me said, Curse you! Why did you cross yourself? Go away from here. Depart in the name of the devil. And so I returned unharmed to my home. Bit thirsty there, Liz. It can be seen from this how craftily the old enemy labors in the seduction of souls. For it was in this way that the bath woman, whom we have mentioned, and who was burned, confessed that she had been seduced by some old woman. A different method, however, was used in the case of her companion witch, who had met the devil in human form on the road while she herself was going to visit her lover for the purpose of fornication. And when the incubus devil had seen her, and has asked her whether she recognized him, and she had said that she did not, he had answered, I am the devil, and if you wish, I will always be ready at your pleasure, and will not fail you in any necessity. And when she had consented, she continued for 18 years, up to the end of her life, to practice diabolical filthiness with him, together with a total abnegation of the faith as a necessary condition. There is also a third method of temptation through the way of sadness and poverty. For when girls have been corrupted and have been scorned by their lovers, after they have immodestly copulated with them in the hope and promise of marriage with them, and have found themselves disappointed in all their hopes, and everywhere despised, they turn to the help and protection of devils, either for the sake of vengeance by bewitching those lovers, or the wives they have married, or for the sake of giving themselves up to every sort of lechery. Alas, experience tells us that there is no number to such girls, and consequently, the witches that spring from this class are innumerable. Let us give a few out of many examples. There is a place in the diocese of Brixen where a young man deposed the following facts concerning the bewitchment of his wife. In the time of my youth I loved a girl who importuned me to marry her, but I refused her and married another girl from another country. But wishing for friendship's sake to please her, I invited her to the wedding. She came, and while the other honest women were wishing us luck and offering gifts, she raised her hand and, in the hearing of other women who were standing round, said, You will have few days of health after today. My bride was frightened, since she did not know her, for as I have said, I had married her from another country, and asked the bystanders who she was, who had threatened her in that way, and they said that she was a loose and vagrom woman. Nonetheless, it happened just as she had said, for after a few days my wife was so bewitched that she lost the use of all her limbs, and even now, after 10 years, the effects of witchcraft can be seen on her body. If we were to collect all the similar instances which have occurred in one town of that diocese, it would take a whole book, but they are written and preserved at the house of the Bishop of Brixen, who still lives to testify to their truth, astounding and unheard of though they are. But we must not pass over in silence one unheard of and astonishing instance. A certain high-born count in the ward of Westerich, in the diocese of Strasbourg, married a noble girl of equal birth, but after he had celebrated the wedding, he was for 3 years unable to know her carnally, on account, as the event proved, of a certain charm which prevented him. In great anxiety, and not knowing what to do, he called loudly on the saints of God. It happened that he went to the state of Metz to negotiate some business, and while he was talking about the streets and squares of the city, attended by his servants and domiciles, he met certain women who had formerly been his mistress. Seeing her, and not at all thinking of the spell that was on him, he spontaneously addressed her kindly for the sake of their old friendship, asking her how she did, and whether she was well. And she, seeing the Count's gentleness, in her turn asked very particularly after his health and affairs. And when he answered that he was well, and that everything prospered with him, she was astonished and was silent for a time. The Count, seeing her thus astonished, again spoke kindly to her, inviting her to converse with him. So she inquired after his wife, and received a similar reply, that she was in all respects well. Then she asked if he had any children, and the Count said he had 3 sons, one born in each year, and that she was more astonished, and was again silent for a while. And the Count asked her, Why, my dear, do you make such careful inquiries? I am sure that you congratulate me on my happiness. Then she answered, Certainly I congratulate you, but curse that old woman who said she would bewitch your body so that you could not have connection with your wife. And in proof of this, there is a pot in the well in the middle of your yard containing certain objects evilly bewitched, and this was placed there in order that, as long as its contents were preserved intact, for so long you would be unable to cohabit. But see, it is all in vain, and I am glad, etc. On his return home, the Count did not delay to have the well drained, and finding the pot, burned its contents and all, whereupon he immediately recovered the virility which he had lost. Wherefore the Countess again invited all the nobility to a fresh wedding celebration, saying that she was now the lady of the castle and estate, after having for so long remained a virgin. For the sake of the Count's reputation, it is not expedient to name the castle and estate, but we have related this story in order that the truth of the matter may be known, to bring so great a crime into open detestation. From this it is clear that witches use various methods to increase their numbers. For the above-mentioned woman, because she had been supplanted by the Count's wife, cast that spell upon the Count with the help of other witches, and this is how one witchcraft brings innumerable others in its train. Need a comfier chair. Chapter 2. Of the way whereby a formal pact with evil is made. The method by which they profess their sacrilege through an open pact of fidelity to devils varies according to the several practices to which different witches are addicted. And to understand this, it first must be noted that there are, as it was shown in the first part of this treatise, 3 kinds of witches, namely those who injure but cannot cure, those who cure but through some strange pact with the devil cannot injure, and those who both injure and cure. And among those who injure, one class in particular stands out, which can perform every sort of witchcraft and spell, comprehending all that all the others individually can do. Wherefore, if we describe the method of profession in their case, it will suffice also for all the other kinds. And this class is made up of those who, against every instinct of human or animal nature, are in the habit of eating and devouring the children of their own species. And this is the most powerful class of witches, who practice innumerable other harms also. For they raise hailstorms and hurtful tempests and lightnings, cause sterility in men and animals, offer to devils or otherwise kill the children whom they do not devour. But these are only the children who have not been reborn by baptism at the font, for they cannot devour those who have been baptized, nor any without God's permission. They can also, before the eyes of their parents, and when no one is in sight, throw into the water children walking by the waterside. They make horses go mad under their riders. They can transport themselves from place to place through the air, either in body or in imagination. They can affect judges and magistrates so that they cannot hurt them. They can cause themselves and others to keep silence under torture. They can bring about a great trembling in the hands and horror in the minds of those who would arrest them. They can show to others occult things and certain future events by the information of devils. Though this may sometimes have a natural cause, see the question whether devils can foretell the future in the second book of Sentences. They can see absent things as if they were present. They can turn the minds of men to inordinate love or hatred. They can at times strike whom they will with lightning, and even kill some men and animals. They can make of no effect the generative desires and even the power of copulation, cause abortion, kill infants in the mother's womb by a mere exterior touch. They can at times bewitch men and animals with a mere look, without touching them, and cause death. They dedicate their own children to devils, and in short, as has been said, they can cause all the plagues which other witches can only cause in part. That is, when the justice of God permits such things to be. All these things this most powerful of all classes of witches can do, but they cannot undo them. but it is common to all of them to practice carnal copulation with devils. Therefore, if we show the method used by this chief class in their profession of their sacrilege, anyone may easily understand the method of their other classes. There were such witches lately, 30 years ago, in the district of Savoy, towards the state of Bern, as Nider tells it in his Formicarius. And there are now some in the country of Lombardy, in the domains of the Duke of Austria, where the Inquisitor of Como, as we told in the former part, caused 41 witches to be burned in 1 year, and he was 55 years old, and still continues to labor in the Inquisition. Now the method of profession is twofold. One is a solemn ceremony, like a solemn vow. The other is private and can be made to the devil at any hour alone. The first method is when witches meet together in the conclave on a set day, and the devil appears to them in the assumed body of a man, and urges them to keep faith with him, promising them worldly prosperity and length of life, and they recommend a novice to his acceptance. And the devil asks whether she will abjure the faith, and forsake the holy Christian religion, and the worship of the anomalous woman, for so they call the most blessed Virgin Mary, and never venerate the sacraments. And if he finds the novice or disciple willing, then the devil stretches out his hand, and so does the novice, and she swears with upraised hand to keep that covenant. And when this is done, the devil at once adds that this is not enough. And when the disciple asks what more must be done, the devil demands the following oath of homage to himself, that she give herself to him, body and soul, forever, and do her utmost to bring others of both sexes into his power. He adds finally that she is to make certain unguents from the bones and limbs of children, especially those who have been baptized, by all which means she will be able to fulfill all her wishes with his help. We inquisitors had credible experience of this method in the town of Breisach, in the diocese of Basel, receiving full information from a young girl witch who had been converted, whose aunt also had been burned in the diocese of Strasbourg, and she added that she had become a witch by the method in which her aunt had first tried to seduce her. For one day her aunt ordered her to go upstairs with her, and at her command to go into a room where she found 15 young men clothed in green garments after the manner of German knights. And her aunt said to her, "Choose whom you wish from these young men, and he will take you for his wife." And when she said she did not wish for any of them, she was sorely beaten and at last consented, and was initiated according to the aforesaid ceremony. She said also that she was often transported by night with her aunt over vast distances, even from Strasbourg to Cologne. This is she who occasioned our inquiry, in the first part, into the question whether witches are truly and bodily transported by devils from place to place. And this was on account of the words of the canon, which seem to imply that they are only so carried in imagination, whereas they are at times actually and bodily transported. For when she was asked whether it was only in imagination and fantastically that they so rode, through an illusion of devils, she answered that they did so in both ways, according to the truth which we shall declare later of the manner in which they are transferred from place to place. She said also that the greatest injuries were inflicted by midwives, because they were under an obligation to kill or offer to devils as many children as possible, and that she had been severely beaten by her aunt because she had opened a secret pot and found the heads of a great many children, and much more she told us, having first, as was proper, taken an oath to speak the truth. And her account of the method of professing the devil's faith undoubtedly agrees with what has been written by that most eminent doctor, John Nider, who even in our times has written very illuminatedly, and it may be especially remarked that he tells of the following, which he had from an inquisitor of the diocese of Edua, who held many inquisitions on witches in that diocese, and caused many to be burned. For he says that this inquisitor told him that in the duchy of Lausanne, certain witches had cooked and eaten their own children, and that the following was the method in which they became initiated into such practices. The witches met together and, by their art, summoned the devil in the form of a man, to whom the novice was compelled to swear to deny the Christian religion, never to adore the Eucharist, and to tread the cross underfoot whenever she could do so secretly. Here is another example from the same source. There was lately a general report brought to the notice of Peter the judge in Boltingen, that 13 infants had been devoured in the state of Bern, and that the public justice exacted full vengeance on the murderers. And when Peter asked one of the captive witches in what manner they ate children, she replied, "This is the manner of it. We set our snares chiefly for unbaptized children, and even for those that have been baptized, especially when they have not been protected by the sign of the cross and prayers." Reader, notice that at the devil's command, they take the unbaptized chiefly in order that they may not be baptized. And with our spells we kill them in their cradles, or even when they are sleeping by their parents' side, in such a way that they afterwards are thought to have been overlain or to have died some other natural death. Then we secretly take them from their graves and cook them in a cauldron, until the whole flesh comes away from the bones to make a soup, which may easily be drunk. Of the more solid matter we make an unguent, which is of virtue to help us in our arts, and pleasures, and our transportations. And with the liquid we fill a flask or skin, whoever drinks from which, with the addition of a few other ceremonies, immediately acquires much knowledge and becomes a leader in our sect. Here is another very clear and distinct example. A young man and his wife, both witches, were imprisoned in Bern, and the man, shut up by himself apart from her in a separate tower, said, "If I could obtain pardon for my sins, I would willingly declare all that I know about witchcraft, for I see that I ought to die." And when he was told by the learned clerks who were there that he could obtain complete pardon if he truly repented, he joyfully resigned himself to death, and laid bare the method by which he had first been infected with his heresy. "The following," he said, "is the manner in which I was seduced. It is first necessary that, on a Sunday before the consecration of holy water, the novice should enter the church with the masters, and there in their presence deny Christ, his faith, baptism, and the whole church. And then he must pay homage to the little master, for so and not otherwise do they call the devil." Here it is to be noted that this method agrees with those that have been recounted, for it is immaterial whether the devil is himself present or not, when homage is offered to him. For this he does in his cunning, perceiving the temperament of the novice, who might be frightened by his actual presence into retracting his vows, whereas he would be more easily persuaded to consent by those who are known to him. And therefore they call him the little master when he is absent, that through seeming disparagement of his master the novice may feel less fear. And then he drinks from the skin which has been mentioned, and immediately feels within himself a knowledge of all our arts, and an understanding of our rites and ceremonies. And in this manner was I seduced. But I believe my wife to be so obstinate that she would rather go straight to the fire than confess the smallest part of the truth. But alas, we are both guilty. And as the young man said, so it happened in every respect. For the young man confessed, and was seen to die in the greatest contrition. But the wife, though convicted by witnesses, would not confess any of the truth, either under torture or in death itself. But when the fire had been prepared by the gaoler, cursed him in the most terrible words, and so was burned. And from these examples their method of initiation in solemn conclave is made clear. The other private method is variously performed. For sometimes when men or women have been involved in some bodily or temporal affliction, the devil comes to them speaking to them in person, and at times speaking to them through the mouth of someone else, and he promises that, if they will agree to his counsels, he will do for them whatever they wish. But he starts from small things, as was said in the first chapter, and leads gradually to the bigger things. We could mention many examples of which have come to our knowledge in the Inquisition, but since this matter presents no difficulty, it can briefly be included with the previous matter. A few points are to be noticed in the explanation of their oath of homage. Now there are certain points to be noted concerning the homage which the devil exacts, as namely for what reason, and in what different ways he does this. It is obvious that his principal motive is to offer the greater offense to the divine majesty by usurping to himself a creature dedicated to God, and thus more certainly to ensure his disciples' future damnation, which is his chief object. Nevertheless, it is often found by us that he has received such homage for a fixed term of years at the time of the profession of perfidy, and sometimes he exacts the profession only, postponing the homage to a later day. And let us declare that the profession consists in a total or partial abnegation of the faith. Total, as has been said before, when the faith is entirely abjured; partial, when the original pact makes it incumbent on the witch to observe certain ceremonies, in opposition to the decrees of the church, such as fasting on Sundays, eating meat on Fridays, concealing certain crimes at confession, or some such profane thing. But let us declare that homage consists in the surrender of body and soul. And we can assign 4 reasons why the devil requires the practice of such things. For we showed in the first part of this treatise, when we examined whether devils could turn the minds of men to love or hatred, that they cannot enter the inner thoughts of the heart, since this belongs to God alone. But the devil can arrive at a knowledge of the men's thoughts by conjecture, as will be shown later. Therefore, if that cunning enemy sees that a novice will be hard to persuade, he approaches her gently, exacting only small things, that he may gradually lead her to greater things. Secondly, it must be believed that there is some diversity among those who deny the faith, since some do so with their lips, but not in their heart, and some both with their lips and in their heart. Therefore, the devil, wishing to know whether their profession comes from the heart as well as from the lips, sets them a certain period, so that he may understand their minds from their works and behavior. Thirdly, if after the lapse of a set time he find that she is less willing to perform certain practices, it is bound to him only by word, but not in her heart, he presumes that the divine mercy has given her the guardianship of a good angel, which he knows to be of great power. Then he casts her off, and tries to expose her to temporal afflictions, so that he gains some profit from her despair. Yeah, a lot of cooking of children. And barbecuing of witches, don't forget that. Ooh. Alright. This is a long-winded chapter, or part, because we're on the next chapter of this part. Chapter 3. How they are transported from place to place. And now, we must consider their ceremonies, and in what manner they proceed in their operations. First, in respect of their actions towards themselves, and in their own persons. And among their chief operations are being bodily transported from place to place, and to practice carnal connection with incubus devils, which we shall treat of separately, beginning with their bodily rectification. But here it must be noted that this transvection offers a difficulty, which has often been mentioned, arising from one single authority, where it is said, it cannot be admitted as true that certain wicked women, perverted by Satan and seduced by the illusions and phantasms of devils, do actually, as they believe and profess, ride in the nighttime on certain beasts with Diana, a goddess of the pagans, or with Herodias, and an innumerable multitude of women, and in the untimely silence of night pass over immense tracts of land, and have to obey her in all things, as their mistress, etc. Wherefore the priest of God ought to preach to the people that this is altogether false, and that such phantasms are sent not by God, but by an evil spirit to confuse the minds of the faithful. For Satan himself transforms himself into various shapes and forms, and by deluding in dreams the mind which he holds captive, leads it through devious ways, etc. And there are those who, taking their example from Saint Germain and a certain other man who kept watch over his daughter to determine this matter, sometimes preach that this is an altogether impossible thing, and that it is indiscreet to ascribe to witches and their operations such levitations, as well as the inquiries which happen to men, animals, and the fruits of the earth, since just as they are victims of fantasy in their transvections, so also are they deluded in the matter of the harm they wreak on living creatures. But this opinion was refuted as heretical in the first question, for it leaves out of account the divine permission with regard to the devil's power, which extends to even greater things than this, and it is contrary to the meaning of sacred scripture, and has caused intolerable damage to Holy Church, since now for many years, thanks to this pestiferous doctrine, witches have remained unpunished, because the secular courts have lost their power to punish them. Therefore, the diligent reader will consider what was there set down for the stamping out of that opinion, and will for the present note how they are transported, and in what ways this is possible, of which some examples will be adduced. It is shown in various ways that they can be bodily transported, and first from the operations of other magicians. For if they could not be transported, it would either be because God does not permit it, or because the devil cannot do this, since it is contrary to nature. It cannot be for the first reason, for both greater and less things can be done by the permission of God. And greater things are often done both to children and men, even to just men confirmed in grace. For when it is asked whether substitutions of children can be effected by the work of the devil, and whether the devil can carry a man from place to place even against his will, to the first question the answer is yes. For William of Paris says in the last part of his De Universo Superstitions of Children, are, with God's permission, possible so that the devil can effect the change of the child, or even a transformation. For such children are always miserable and crying, and although 4 or 5 mothers could hardly support enough milk for them, they never grow fat, yet are heavy beyond the ordinary. But this should neither be affirmed nor denied to women, on account of the great fear which it may cause them. But they should be instructed to ask the opinion of learned men, for God permits this on account of the sins of the parents, in that sometimes men curse their pregnant wives, saying, "May you be carrying a devil," or some such thing. In the same way, impatient women often say something of the sort, and many examples have been given by other men, some of them pious men. For Vincent of Beauvais, Special History, related a story told by St. Peter Damian of a 5-year-old son of a nobleman, who was for the time living in a monastery, and one night he was carried out of the monastery into a locked mill, where he was found in the morning. And when he was questioned, he said that he had been carried by some men to a great feast and bidden to eat, and afterwards he was put into the mill through the roof. And what of those magicians who we generally call necromancers, who are often carried through the air by devils for long distances? And sometimes they even persuade others to go with them on a horse, which is not really a horse, but a devil in that form, and, as they say, thus warn their companions not to make the sign of the cross. And though we are two who write this book, one of us has very often seen and known such men, for there is a man who was once a scholar, and is now believed to be a priest in the diocese of Freising, who used to say that at one time he had been bodily carried through the air by a devil and taken to the most remote parts. There lives another priest in Oberdorf, a town near Landshut, who was at the time a friend of that one of us, who saw with his own eyes such a transportation, and tells how the man was borne on high with arms stretched out, shouting but not whimpering. And the cause, as he tells it, was as follows. A number of scholars had met together to drink beer, and they all agreed that the one who fetched the beer should not have to pay anything. And so one of them was going to fetch the beer, and on opening the door saw a thick cloud before the Grunzel, and returning in terror told his companions why he would not go for the drink. Then that one of them who was carried away said angrily, "Even if the devil were there, I shall fetch the drink." And going out, he was carried through the air in the sight of all the others. And indeed, it must be confessed that such things can happen not only to those who are awake, but also to men who are asleep. Namely, they can be bodily transported through the air while they are fast asleep. This is clear in the case of certain men who walk in their sleep on the roofs of houses and over the highest buildings, and no one can oppose their progress either on high or below. And if they are called by their own names by the other bystanders, they immediately fall crashing to the ground. Many think, and not without reason, that this is the devil's work, for devils are of many different kinds, and some who fell from the lower choir of angels are tortured as if for small sins with lighter punishments, as well as the punishment of damnation, which they must suffer eternally. And these cannot hurt anybody, at least not seriously, but for the most part carry out only practical jokes. And others are incubi or succubi, who punish men in the night, defiling them in the sin of lechery. It is not wonderful if they are given also to horseplay such as this. The truth can be deduced from the words of Cassian, Calationes 1, where he says that there is no doubt that there are as many different unclean spirits as there are different desires in men. For it is manifest that some of them, which the common people call fauns, and we call trolls, which abound in Norway, are such buffoons and jokers that they haunt certain places and roads, and without being able to do any hurt to those who pass by, are content with mocking and deluding them, and try to weary them rather than hurt them. And some of them only visit men with harmless nightmares, but others are so furious and truculent that they are not content to afflict with an atrocious dilation the bodies of those whom they inflate, but even come rushing from on high and hasten to strike them with the most savage blows. Our author means that they do not only possess men, but torture them horribly, as did those which are described in St. Matthew 8. From this we can conclude, first, that it must not be said that witches cannot be locally transported, because God does not permit it. For if he permits it in the case of the just and innocent, and of other magicians, how should he not in the case of those who are totally dedicated to the devil? And we say with all reverence, did not the devil take up our Savior and carry him up to a high place, as the gospel testifies? Neither can the second argument of our opponents be conceded, that the devil cannot do this thing. For it has already been shown that he has so great natural power, exceeding all corporeal power, that there is no earthly power that can be compared with him. As it is said, there is no power on earth that can be compared with him, etc. Indeed, the natural power of virtue which is in Lucifer is so great that there is none greater among the good angels in heaven. For just as he excelled all the angels in his nature, and not his nature, but only his grace, was diminished by his fall, so that nature still remains in him, although it is darkened and bound. Wherefore the gloss on that, there is no power on earth, says, although he excels all things, yet he is subject to the merits of the saints. Really? Oh, we'll keep trying. I'll tone it down a bit. How bad's the echo? No, we'll keep going for a bit. Two objections. Hold on. All right. Let's continue. Two objections which someone may bring forward are not valid. First, that man's soul could resist him, and that the text seems to speak of one devil in particular, since it speaks in the singular, namely Lucifer. And because it was he who tempted Christ in the wilderness and seduced the first man, he is now bound in chains, and the other angels are not so powerful, since he excels them all. Therefore, the other spirits cannot transport wicked men through the air from place to place. It's doing that again. All right. How about now? Is it still going? Oh, son of a bitch. How long is the repeat? How long after? And this is gonna just consistently piss me off. Thought I had it fixed. 2 seconds. Figured it out. No, I thought I had it fixed. That's what we were talking about yesterday. But I think I got it now. It was something else that turned on. Yeah, I know it should be. Because it rechecked. Liz, you remember we were doing it yesterday and it stopped? Or was it the last time? And it just I'm going to have to make sure I check it every time. Alright. Thank you, both of you. Should I start over? Damn it, OBS. I've been going for an hour already. I'm gonna re-record it later. I lost where I was. No, I wanted to know. That's okay, Liz. It's been getting on my nerve. I thought we had fixed it yesterday. Yeah, at least the mic wasn't muted. That's a plus. Alright, we got everything fixed now. For now, until it breaks again. Alright, where was I? Alright. I think I was here. Two objections which someone may bring forward are not valid. First, that man's soul could resist him, and that the text seems to speak of one devil in particular, since it speaks in the singular, namely Lucifer, and because it was he who tempted Christ in the wilderness and seduced the first man, he is now bound in chains, and the other angels are not so powerful, since he excels them all. Therefore the other spirits cannot transport wicked men through the air from place to place. These arguments have no force, for to consider the angels first, even the least angel is incomparably superior to all human power, as can be proved in many ways. First, a spiritual is stronger than a corporeal power, and so it is the power of an angel, or even of the soul greater than that of the body. Secondly, as to the soul, every bodily shape owes its individuality to matter, and in the case of human beings, to the fact that a soul informs it. But immaterial forms are absolute intelligence, and therefore have an absolute and more universal power. For this reason, the soul, when joined to the body, cannot in this way suddenly transfer its body locally or raise it up in the air, although it could easily do so with God's permission if it were separate from its body. Much more, then, is this possible to an entirely immaterial spirit such as a good or bad angel. For a good angel transported Habakkuk in a moment from Judea to Chaldea, and for this reason it is concluded that those who by night are carried in their sleep or over high buildings are not carried by their own souls, nor by the influence of the stars, but by some mightier power, as was shown above. Thirdly, it is the nature of the body to be moved, as to place directly by a spiritual nature, and as Aristotle says, Physics 8, local motion is the first of bodily motions, and he proves this by saying that local motion is not intrinsically in the power of any body as such, but is due to some exterior force. Wherefore it is concluded, not so much from the holy doctors as from the philosophers, that the highest bodies, that is, the stars, are moved by spiritual essences, and by separate intelligences, which are good both by nature and in the intention, for we see that the soul is the prime and chief cause of local motion in the body. It must be said, therefore, that neither in its physical capacity nor in that of its soul can the human body resist being suddenly transported from place to place. With God's permission, by a spiritual essence, good both in intention and by nature, when the good, who are confirmed in grace, are transported, or by an essence good by nature, but not good in intention, when the wicked are transported. Any who wish may refer to St. Thomas in 3 articles, in Part 1, question 90, and again in his question concerning sin, and also in the second book of Sentences on the power of devils over bodily effects. Now the following is their method of being transported. They take the unguent which, as we have said, they make at the devil's instruction from the limbs of children, particularly of those whom they have killed before baptism, and anoint with it a chair or a broomstick, whereupon they are immediately carried up into the air, either by day or by night, and either visibly or, if they wish, invisibly, for the devil can conceal a body by the interposition of some other substance, as was shown in the first part of the treatise, where we spoke of the glamours and illusions caused by the devil. And although the devil for the most part performs this by means of this unguent, to the end that children should be deprived of the grace of baptism and salvation, yet he often seems to effect the same transvection without its use. For at times he transports the witches on animals, which are not true animals, but devils in that form, and sometimes even without any exterior help, they are visibly carried solely by the operation of the devil's power. Here is an instance of visible transportation in the daytime. In the town of Waldshut on the Rhine, in the diocese of Constance, there was a certain witch who was so detested by the townsfolk that she was not invited to the celebration of a wedding, which, however, nearly all the other townsfolk were present. Being indignant because of this and wishing to be revenged, She summoned the devil and, telling him the cause of her vexation, asked him to raise a hailstorm and drive all the wedding guests from their dancing, and the devil agreed, and raising her up, carried her through the air to a hill near the town, in the sight of some shepherds. And since, as she afterwards confessed, she had no water to pour into the trench, for this, as we shall show, is the method they use to raise hailstorms, she made a small trench and filled it with her urine instead of water, and stirred it with her finger, after the custom, with the devil standing by. Then the devil suddenly raised that liquid up and sent a violent storm of hailstones, which fell only on the dancers and townsfolk. And when they had dispersed, and were discussing among themselves the cause of the storm, the witch shortly afterwards entered the town, and this greatly aroused their suspicions. But when the shepherds had told what they had seen, their suspicions became almost a certainty. So she was arrested and confessed that she had done this thing because she had not been invited to the wedding, and for this and for many other witchcrafts she had perpetrated, she was burned. Chapter 4. Here follows the way whereby witches copulate with those devils known as incubi. As to the method in which witches copulate with incubus, devils, 6 points are to be noted. First, as to the devil and the body which he assumes, of what element it is formed. Second, as to the act, whether it is always accompanied with the injection of semen received from some other man. Third, as to the time and place, whether one time is more favorable than another for this practice. Fourth, whether the act is visible to the women, and whether only those who were begotten in this way are so visited by devils. Fifth, whether it applies only to those who were offered to the devil at birth by midwives. Sixth, whether the actual venereal pleasure is greater or less in this act. And we will speak first of the matter and quality of the body which the devil assumes. It must be said that he assumes an aerial body, and that it is in some respects terrestrial, in so far as it has an earthly property through condensation. And this is explained as follows. The air cannot of itself take definite shape, except the shape of some other body in which it is included. And in that case it is not bound by its own limits, but by those of something else, and one part of the air continues into the next part. Therefore, he cannot simply assume an aerial body as such. Know, moreover, that the air is in every way a most changeable and fluid matter, and a sign of this is the fact that when any have tried to cut or pierce with a sword the body assumed by a devil, they have not been able to, for the divided parts of the air at once join together again. From this it follows that air is in itself a very competent matter, but because it cannot take shape unless some other terrestrial matter is joined with it, therefore it is necessary that the air which forms the devil's assumed body should be in some way inspissated, and approach the property of the earth while still retaining its true property as air. And devils and disembodied spirits can effect this condensation by means of gross vapors raised from the earth, and by collecting them together into shapes in which they abide, not as defilers of them, but only as their motive power which give to that body the formal appearance of life, in very much the same way as the soul informs the body to which it is joined. They are, moreover, in this assumed and shaped bodies like a sailor in a ship which the wind moves. So when it is asked of what sort is the body assumed by the devil, it is to be said that with regard to its material, it is one thing to speak of the beginning of its assumption, and another thing to speak of its end. For it is the beginning that is just air, but in the end it is inspissated air, partaking of some of the properties of the earth. And all this the devils, with God's permission, can do of their own nature, for the spiritual nature is superior to the bodily. Therefore the bodily nature must obey the devils in respect of local motion, though not in respect of the assumption of natural shapes, either accidental or substantial, except in the case of some small creatures, and then only with the help of some other agent, as has been hinted before. But as to local motion, no shape is beyond their power. Thus they can move them as they wish, in such circumstances as they will. From this there may arise an incidental question as to what should be thought when a good or bad angel performs some of the functions of life by means of true natural bodies, and not in aerial bodies, as in the case of Balaam's ass, through which the angel spoke, and when the devils take possession of bodies. It is to be said that those bodies are not called assumed, but occupied. See St. Thomas, chapter 2, section 8, whether the angels assume bodies, but let us keep strictly to our argument. In what way is it to be understood that devils talk with witches, see them, hear them, eat with them, and copulate with them? And this is the second part of this first difficulty. For the first, it is to be said that three things are required for true conversation, namely, lungs to draw in air, and this is not only for the sake of producing sound, but also to cool the heart, and even mutes have this necessary quality. Secondly, it is necessary that some percussion be made of a body in the air, as a greater or less sound is made when one beats wood in the airs, or rings a bell. For when a substance that is susceptible to sound is struck by a sound-producing instrument, it gives out a sound according to its size, which is received in the air and multiplied to the ears of the hearer, to whom, if he is far off, it seems to come through space. Thirdly, a voice is required, and it may be said that what is called sound in inanimate bodies is called voice in living bodies. And here the tongue strikes the respirations of air against an instrument or living natural organ provided by God, and this is not a bell, which is called a sound, whereas this is a voice. And this third requisite may clearly be exemplified by the second. And I have set this down that preachers may have a method of teaching the people. And fourthly, it is necessary that he who forms the voice should mean to express by means of that voice some concept of mind to someone else, and that he should himself understand what he is saying, and so manage his voice by successively striking his teeth with his tongue in his mouth, by opening and shutting his lips, and by sending the air struck in his mouth into the outer air, that in this way the sound is reproduced in order in the ears of the hearer, who then understands his meaning. To return to the point, devils have no lungs or tongue, though they can show the latter as well as teeth and lips, artificially made according to the condition of their body. Therefore they cannot truly and properly speak, but since they have understanding, and when they wish to express their meaning, then, by some disturbance of the air included in their assumed body, not of air breathed in and out, as is in the case of men, they produce not voices, but sounds which have some likeness to voices, and send them articulately through the outside air to the ears of the hearer. And that the likeness of a voice can be made without respiration of air is clear, from the case of other animals, which do not breathe, but are said to make a sound, as do also certain other instruments, as Aristotle says in the De Anima. For certain fishes, when they are caught, suddenly utter a cry outside the water and die. All this is applicable to what follows, so far as the point where we treat of generative function, but not as regards good angels. If anyone wishes to inquire further into the matter of devils speaking in possessed bodies, he may refer to St. Thomas in the second book of Sentences. For in that case, they use the bodily organs of the possessed body, since they occupy those bodies in respect of the limits of their corporeal quantity, but not in respect of the limits of their essence, either of the body or of the soul. Observe a distinction between substance and quantity, or accident, but this is impertinent. For now we must say, in what manner they see and hear. Now sight is of two kinds, spiritual and corporeal, and the former infinitely excels the latter, for it can penetrate and is not hindered by distance, owing to the faculty of light of which it makes use. Therefore, it must be said that in no way does an angel, either good or bad, see with the eyes of its assumed body, nor does it use any bodily property, as it does in speaking, when it uses the air and the vibration of the air to produce sound, which becomes reproduced in the ears of the hearer. Wherefore their eyes are painted eyes, and they freely appear to men in these likenesses. that they may manifest to them their natural properties, and converse with them spiritually by these means. For with this purpose the holy angels have often appeared to the fathers at the command of God and with his permission. And the bad angels manifest themselves to wicked men in order that men, recognizing their qualities, may associate themselves with them, here in sin and elsewhere in punishment. St. Dionysius, at the end of the celestial hierarchy, says, in all parts of the human body the angel teaches us to consider their properties, concluding that since corporeal vision is an operation of the living body through a bodily organ, which devils lack, therefore in their assumed bodies, just as they have the likeness of limbs, so that have the likeness of their functions. And we can speak in the same way of their hearing, which is far finer than that of the body, for it can know the concept of the mind and the conversation of the soul more subtly than can a man by hearing the mental concept through the medium of the spoken word. See St. Thomas, the second book of Sentences, discussion 8. For if the secret wishes of a man are read in his face, and physicians can tell the thoughts of the heart from the heartbeats, and the state of the pulse, all the more can such things be known by devils. And we may say as to eating that in the complete act of eating there are 4 processes: mastication in the mouth, swallowing into the stomach, digestion in the stomach, and fourthly, metabolism of the necessary nutriment and ejection of what is superfluous. All angels can perform the first 2 processes for eating in their assumed bodies, but not the third and fourth. But instead of digesting and ejecting, they have another power by which the food is suddenly dissolved in the surrounding matter. In Christ, the process of eating was in all respects complete, since he had the nutritive and metabolistic powers, not, be it said, for the purpose of converting food into his own body, for those powers were, like his body, glorified, so that the food was suddenly dissolved in his body, as when one throws water onto fire. How in modern time witches perform the carnal acts with incubus devils, and how they are multiplied by this means. But no difficulty arises out of what has been said, with regard to our principal subject, which is the carnal act which incubi in an assumed body perform with witches, unless perhaps any one doubts whether modern witches practice such abominable coitus, and whether witches had their origin in this abomination. In answering these 2 doubts, we shall say, as to the former of them, something of the activities of the witches who lived in olden times, about 1400 years before the incarnation of our Lord. It is, for example, unknown whether they were addicted to these filthy practices, as modern witches have been since that time, for so far as we know, history tells us nothing on this subject. But no one who reads the histories can doubt that there have always been witches, and that by their evil works much harm has been done to men, animals, and the fruits of the earth, and that incubus and succubus devils have always existed. For the traditions of the canons and the holy doctors have left and handed down to posterity many things concerning them, through many hundreds of years. Yet there is this difference, that in times long past the incubus devils used to infest women against their wills, as is often shown by Nider in his Formicarius, and by Thomas of Brabant in his book on the universal good, or on bees. But the theory that the modern witches are tainted with this sort of diabolic filthiness is not substantiated only in our opinion, since the expert testimony of the witches themselves has made all these things credible, and that they do not now, as in times past, subject themselves unwillingly, but willingly embrace this most foul and miserable servitude. For how many women have been left to be punished by secular law in various dioceses, especially in Constance and the town of Ratisbon, who have been for many years addicted to these abominations, some from their 20th and some from their 12th or 13th year, and always with a total or partial abnegation of the faith. All the inhabitants of those places are witnesses of it, but without reckoning those who secretly repented, and those who returned to the faith, no less than 48 have been burned in 5 years. And there was no question of credulity in accepting their stories, because they turned to free repentance. For they all agreed in this, namely, that they were bound to indulge in these lewd practices in order that the ranks of their perfidy might be increased. But we shall treat these individually in the second part of this work, where their particular deeds are described, omitting those which came under the notice of our colleague, the Inquisitor of Como in the county of Burbia, who in the space of 1 year, which was the year of grace 1485, caused 41 witches to be burned, who all publicly affirmed, as it is said, that they had practiced these abominations with devils. Therefore this matter is fully substantiated by eyewitnesses, by hearsay, and the testimony of credible witnesses. As for the second doubt, whether witches had their origin from these abominations, we may say with St. Augustine that it is true that all the superstitious arts had their origin in a pestilent association of men with devils, for he says so in his work on the Christian doctrine. All this sort of practices, whether of trifling or noxious superstition, arose from some pestilent association of men with devils, as though some pact of infidel and guileful friendship had been formed, and they are utterly to be repudiated. Notice here that it is manifest that as there are various kinds of superstition or magic arts, and various societies of those who practice them, and as among the 14 kinds of that art, the species of witches is the worst, since they have not a tacit but an overt and express pact with the devil, and more than this, have to acknowledge a form of devil worship through abjuring the faith. Therefore it follows that witches hold the worst kind of association with devils, and especially reference to the behavior of women, who always delight in vain things. Hey Sabu, how you doing? But worst at getting my audio to work correctly. Though I think we have it fixed now. I've only gone 15 pages. Not even that. These are long pages. Alright, let's do... Not even 10 pages. Holy shit, I'm a slow reader. Alright, one more chapter, I think. Chapter 5. Witches commonly perform their spells through the sacraments of the Church, and how they impair the powers of generation, and how they may cause other ills to happen to God's creatures, of all kinds. But herein we accept the question of the influence of the stars. But now there are several things to be noted concerning their methods of bringing injury upon other creatures of both sexes, and upon the fruits of the earth. First, with regard to men, then with regard to beasts, and thirdly with regard to the fruits of the earth. And as to men, first how they can cast an obstructive spell on the procreant forces, and even on the venereal act, so that a woman cannot conceive, or a man cannot perform the act. Secondly, how that act is obstructed, sometimes with regard to one woman, but not another. Thirdly, how they take away the virile member, as though it were altogether torn away from the body. Fourthly, if it is possible to distinguish whether any of the above injuries have been caused by a devil on his own account, or if it has been through the agency of a witch. Fifthly, how witches change men and women into beasts by some prestige or glamour. Sixthly, how witch midwives in various ways kill that which has been conceived in the mother's womb, and when they do not do this, offer the children to devils. Unless these things should seem incredible, they have been proved in the first part of this work by questions and answers to arguments, to which, if necessary, the doubtful reader may turn back for the purpose of investigating the truth. For the present, our object is only to adduce actual facts and the examples which have been found by us, or have been written by others, in detestation of so great a crime, to substantiate those former arguments in case they should be difficult for anyone to understand, and by those things that are related in the second part, to bring back to the faith and away from their error those who think there are no witches, and that no witchcraft can be done in the world. And with regard to the first class of injuries with which they afflict the human race, it is to be noted that apart from the methods by which they injure other creatures, they have 6 ways of injuring humanity, and one is to induce an evil love in a man for a woman, or in a woman for a man. The second is to plant hatred or jealousy in anyone. The third is to bewitch them so that a man cannot perform the genital act with a woman, or conversely a woman with a man, or by various means to procure an abortion. As has been said before, the fourth is to cause some disease in any of the human organs. The fifth, to take away life. The sixth, to deprive them of reason. In this connection, it should be said that saving the influence of the stars, the devils can by their natural power in every way cause real defects and infirmities. And this by their natural spiritual power, which is superior to any bodily power, for no one infirmity is quite like another, and this is equally true of natural defects, in which there is no physical infirmity. Therefore, they proceed by different methods, to cause each different infirmity or defect, and of those we shall give instances in the body of this work, as necessity arises. But first, lest the reader's mind should be kept in any doubt as to why they have no power to alter the influence of the stars, we shall say that there is a threefold reason. First, the stars are above them, even in the region of punishment, which is the region of the lower mists, and this is by reason of the duty which is assigned to them. See the first part, question 2, where we dealt with incubus and succubus devils. The second reason is that the stars are governed by the good angels. See many places concerning the powers which move the stars, and especially St. Thomas, part 1, question 90. And in this matter the philosophers agree with the theologians. Thirdly, it is on account of the general order and common good of the universe, which would suffer general detriment if evil spirits were allowed to cause any alteration in the influence of the stars. Wherefore those changes which were miraculously caused in the Old or New Testament were done by God through the good angels, as for example when the sun stood still for Joshua, or when it went backward for Hezekiah, or when it was supernaturally darkened at the passion of the Christ. But in all other matters, with God's permission, they can work their spells, either the devils themselves or devils through the agency of witches, and in fact it is evident that they do so. Secondly, it is to be noted that in all their methods of working injury, they nearly always instruct witches to make their instruments of witchcraft by means of the sacraments, or sacramental things of the church, or some holy thing consecrated to God, as when they sometimes place a waxen image under the altar cloth, or draw a thread through the holy chrism, or use some other consecrated thing in such a way, and there are 3 reasons for this. For a similar reason, they are wont to practice their witchcraft at the more sacred time of the year, especially at the advent of our Lord and at Christmas. First, that by such means they may make men guilty of not only perfidy, but also sacrilege, by contaminating whatever is divine in them, and that so they may the more deeply offend God, their Creator, damn their own souls, and cause many more to rush into sin. Secondly, that God, being so heavily offended by men, may grant the devil greater power of tormenting them. For so say St. Gregory, that in his anger he sometimes grants the wicked their prayers and petitions which he mercifully denies to others. And the third reason is that, by the seeming appearance of good, he may more easily deceive certain simple men, who think that they have performed some pious act, and obtain the grace from God, whereas they have only sinned the more heavily. A fourth reason also can be added, touching the more sacred seasons and New Year, for according to St. Augustine, there are other mortal sins besides adultery by which the observance of the festivals may be infringed. Superstition, moreover, and witchcraft arising from the most servile operations of the devil are contrary to the reverence that is due to God. Therefore, as has been said, he causes a man to fall more deeply, and the Creator is the more offended. And of the new year we may say, according to St. Isidore, Etymology 8, section 2, that Janus, from whom the month of January is named, which also begins on the day of circumcision, was an idol with two faces, as if one were the end of the old year, and the other the beginning of the new, and as it were the protector and auspicious author of the coming year. And in honor of him, or rather of the devil, in the form of that idol, the pagans made such boisterous revelry, and were very merry among themselves, holding various dances and feasts. And concerning these blessed Augustine makes mention in many places, and gives a very ample description of them in his 26th book. And now bad Christians imitate these corruptions, turning them to lasciviousness when they run about at the time of the carnival with masks and jests and other superstitions. Similarly, witches use these revelries of the devil for their own advantage, and work their spells about the time of the new year in respect of the divine offices and worship, as on St. Andrew's Day and at Christmas. And now, as to how they work their witchcraft, first by means of the sacraments, and then by means of sacramental objects, we will refer to a few known facts, discovered by us in the Inquisition. In a town which it is better not to name, for the sake of charity and expediency, when a certain witch received the body of our Lord, she suddenly lowered her head, as is the detestable habit of women, placed her garment near her mouth, and taking the body of the Lord out of her mouth, wrapped it in a handkerchief, and afterwards, at the suggestion of the devil, placed it in a pot in which there was a toad, and hid it in the ground near her house by the storehouse, together with several other things, by means of which she had to work her witchcraft. But with the help of the storehouse, together with several other things, by means of which she had to... with the help of God's mercy, this great crime was detected and brought to light. For on the following day, a workman was going on his business near that house, and heard a sound like a child crying. And when he had come near to the stone under which the pot had been hidden, he heard it much more clearly, and thinking that some child had been buried there by the woman, went to the mayor or chief magistrate, and told him what had been done, as he thought by the infanticide. And the mayor quickly sent his servants, and found it to be as he had said. But they were unwilling to exhume the child, thinking it was wiser to place a watch and wait to see if any woman came near the place, for they did not know that it was the Lord's body that was hidden there. And so it happened that the same witch came to the place, and secretly hid the pot under her garment before their eyes. And when she was taken and questioned, she discovered her crime, saying that the Lord's body had been hidden in the pot with a toad, so that by means of their dust she might be able to cause injuries at her will to men and other creatures. It is also to be noted that when witches communicate, they observe this custom, that when they can do so without being noticed, they receive the Lord's body under their tongue, instead of on the top. And as far as can be seen, the reason is that they never wish to receive any remedy that might counteract their abjuration of the faith, either by confession or by receiving the sacrament of the Eucharist. And secondly, because in this way it is easier for them to take the Lord's body out of their mouths, so that they can apply it, as has been said, to their own uses, to the greater offense of the Creator. For this reason, all rectors of the Church and those who communicate the people are enjoined to take the utmost care when they communicate women, that the mouth shall be well open, and the tongue thrust well out, and their garments be kept quite clear. And the more care is taken in this respect, the more witches become known by this means. Numberless other superstitions they practice by means of sacramental objects. Sometimes they place a waxen image or some aromatic substance under the altar cloth, as we said before, and then hide it under the threshold of a house. so that the person for whom it is placed there may be bewitched on crossing over it. Countless instances could be brought forward, but these minor sorts of spells are proved by the greater. Alright. I think I'm good for the day. Hopefully we got our audio solved, and I'll re-record that at some point. So Liz, Sarah, Savu, thanks for hanging. Thanks for finally helping get that sound. Hopefully it stays. I'm gonna have to check it every time. Alright. Probably be on tomorrow even. So. And then next week for more reading. Yay. Thanks for hanging. I'm out.